December 26, 1996. 5:52 a.m. Patsy Ramsey picks up the phone and dials 911. Her voice is frantic, almost incoherent. "We have a kidnapping," she screams. "There's a note left and our daughter is gone." Within minutes, the Boulder Police Department arrives at 755 15th Street, a Tudor-style home in one of Colorado's most affluent neighborhoods. They're expecting a kidnapping. What they would find 8 hours later, hidden in the basement of that very same house, would become one of the most analyzed, debated, and controversial murder cases in American history. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen whose death has haunted investigators, divided a nation, and remained unsolved for nearly 3 decades. But after 28 years of forensic advances, investigative breakthroughs, and relentless pursuit of the truth, new evidence has emerged that may finally answer the question that has tormented her family and captivated the world. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? Before we unlock the vault on this case, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at True Crime Vault, we dive deep into the cases that deserve to be remembered, bringing you investigations backed by facts, evidence, and respect for those whose lives were forever changed. New episodes every week. Now let's begin. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. Her name was a combination of her father's first and middle names, JonBenét. She was the youngest child of John and Patsy Ramsey. Her father was a successful businessman, president of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had recently become a billion-dollar subsidiary. Her mother, Patsy, was a former Miss West Virginia who had graduated from West Virginia University. The family also included JonBenét's older brother, Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of her death. By all accounts, the Ramseys were living the American dream. They resided in a sprawling 7,000-square-foot home in Boulder, Colorado. JonBenét was a vibrant child, known for her beauty pageant success. She had won titles including Little Miss Colorado, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and America's Royale Miss. But she was more than just a pageant competitor. Teachers described her as bright, energetic, and kind. She played the violin, took piano lessons, and was preparing for the children's Christmas play at St. John's Episcopal Church. Christmas Day, 1996, was spent at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, family friends of the Ramseys. The families exchanged gifts, ate dinner together, and the children played. According to everyone present, it was a normal, joyful holiday celebration. The Ramseys returned home around 9:30 p.m. Both parents later stated that JonBenét fell asleep in the car and John carried her directly to bed. Burke was also put to bed. The house settled into what should have been a peaceful night. But somewhere in the hours that followed, between approximately 10 p.m. on December 25th and 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, something unspeakable happened inside that home. Patsy Ramsey told police she woke up around 5:30 a.m. to prepare for a planned trip to their vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan. As she descended the spiral staircase from the second floor to the first, she discovered 3 handwritten pages laid out on one of the lower steps. The note was addressed to John Ramsey. It claimed to be from a small foreign faction and demanded $118,000 for the safe return of JonBenét. The amount was oddly specific, almost exactly matching a bonus John had recently received from his company. The ransom note was unusual in every possible way. It was nearly 3 pages long, written on a pad of paper taken from inside the Ramsey home, using a pen that was also from the house. Both the pad and the pen were later found placed back where they belonged. Ransom notes are typically short, direct, and brought to the scene by the perpetrator. This one rambled, included movie quotes, and contained details that seemed oddly personal. It read, in part, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter." The note went on to warn against contacting police, threatening that JonBenét would be beheaded if they did. It instructed John to withdraw $118,000 in specific denominations and await a call between 8 and 10 a.m. the following morning. Patsy's 911 call came at 5:52 a.m. Despite the note's warnings, she immediately contacted authorities. The Boulder police arrived within minutes. Officer Rick French was the first to respond. He began a cursory search of the home while other officers secured the scene and questioned the family. But this initial response would later be heavily criticized. The house was not properly sealed. Friends and family members were allowed to enter. Potential evidence was contaminated. The crime scene, in the crucial first hours, was compromised. Detective Linda Arndt arrived at the Ramsey home at 8:10 a.m. By this point, several people had gathered: John and Patsy Ramsey, their son Burke, who had been awakened, and family friends including Fleet and Priscilla White, and John and Barbara Fernie. The house was active, chaotic. People were moving through rooms, making phone calls, trying to process what was happening. The ransom note had promised a call between 8 and 10 a.m. Everyone waited. 8 o'clock passed. 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. No call came. The tension in that house was unbearable. Where was JonBenét? If this was truly a kidnapping, why hadn't the kidnappers made contact? At approximately 1 p.m., Detective Arndt asked John Ramsey and Fleet White to search the house again, top to bottom, to see if anything seemed out of place or if they noticed anything unusual. John headed to the basement. Fleet White accompanied him. They checked various rooms. Then John opened the door to a small wine cellar, a windowless room in the basement that Officer French had checked earlier that morning, but had not thoroughly searched because it was dark and appeared empty. John Ramsey flipped on the light, and there she was, JonBenét, lying on the floor, covered with a white blanket. A piece of black duct tape covered her mouth. A white cord was tied around her neck, fashioned into a garrote with a broken paintbrush handle. Her hands were tied loosely above her head with white cord. John let out a scream. He immediately pulled the tape from her mouth and picked up his daughter's body, carrying her upstairs. Detective Arndt attempted to perform CPR, though it was clear JonBenét had been dead for hours. Her body was cold and rigid. At 1:05 p.m., JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was officially pronounced dead. What had begun as a kidnapping case had transformed into a murder investigation, and the crime scene, already compromised by hours of foot traffic and contamination, was now irreparably damaged. The location where the body was found, the position of evidence, the condition of the room, all of it had been altered when John moved his daughter's body. The autopsy, performed on December 27th by Dr. John Meyer, the Boulder County coroner, revealed horrific details. JonBenét had died from asphyxiation due to strangulation. The garrote around her neck had been tightened with such force that it had embedded into her skin. But that wasn't all. She had also suffered a massive skull fracture, an 8.5-inch linear fracture on the right side of her head that had caused significant brain hemorrhaging. The force required to inflict such an injury was substantial. Additionally, there was evidence of chronic sexual abuse, though this finding would later be disputed by other experts who reviewed the autopsy materials. Stomach contents indicated she had eaten pineapple shortly before her death, likely within an hour or two. This detail would become significant because Patsy had stated JonBenét was asleep when they arrived home and went straight to bed without eating anything. Yet a bowl of pineapple with a spoon in it was found on the kitchen table, with Burke and Patsy's fingerprints on the bowl. The timeline of her death was estimated to be between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 2 a.m. on December 26th, though pinpointing an exact time of death proved difficult. What was clear was that JonBenét had been killed while her family slept upstairs, in a home that showed no signs of forced entry. The investigation into JonBenét's death was unlike anything Boulder, Colorado had ever seen. This was a small city, relatively affluent, with low crime rates. The police department had little experience with child homicides, and now they were faced with what appeared to be one of the most complex and bizarre murder cases imaginable. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, the case had become national news. Within weeks, it was international. Investigators focused on two primary theories. The first was that an intruder had entered the home, hidden for hours, killed JonBenét, and escaped without leaving behind significant evidence. The second theory was that someone inside the home, a family member, was responsible. Let's examine the intruder theory first. Supporters of this theory pointed to several pieces of evidence. An unidentified boot print was found in the basement near where JonBenét's body was discovered. A palm print on the wine cellar door didn't match any member of the Ramsey family. A broken window in the basement could have been an entry point. And most significantly, Unidentified male DNA was found in JonBenét's underwear and on her long johns, DNA that didn't match anyone in the family or any known person with access to the home. There was also a window well outside the broken basement window that contained a suitcase positioned directly beneath the window, as if someone had used it as a step. Inside the suitcase was a blanket, and on that blanket was a small shard of glass from the broken window. Additionally, neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles in the alley behind the Ramsey home on Christmas night. One neighbor claimed to have heard a scream around midnight, though this was disputed because other nearby residents heard nothing. But the intruder theory had significant problems. There were no footprints in the snow outside the basement window, though coverage was not complete. More critically, the ransom note presented enormous logical issues. What intruder breaks into a home, spends time writing a 3-page ransom note using materials from inside the house, kills the child, leaves the body in the basement, places the ransom note on the stairs, and then flees without ever making a ransom demand? The behavior made no sense. The other theory that someone inside the home was responsible gained traction with investigators early on. The Boulder Police Department, particularly Detective Steve Thomas and Tom Trujillo, believed strongly that the evidence pointed to the family. Their theory was that JonBenét's death had been accidental, possibly the result of a bedwetting incident or some other domestic dispute, and that the ransom note and staging of the crime scene were designed to cover up what had really happened. Suspicion fell heavily on Patsy Ramsey. Handwriting experts were divided, but some believed the ransom note could have been written by her. The note contained phrases and words that seemed unusual for a kidnapper but familiar to someone educated like Patsy. It used terms like attaché, quoted movies like Speed and Dirty Harry, and the writer seemed to know specific details about John's business and bonus. 4 handwriting experts hired by the Boulder Police Department examined the ransom note. 2 couldn't rule out Patsy as the author. 2 others said the evidence was inconclusive. But it's crucial to note that no expert definitively said Patsy wrote the note, and several independent experts later said the writing didn't match her natural hand. There was also the fiber evidence. Fibers from Patsy's jacket were found on the duct tape covering JonBenét's mouth and on the cord used to make the garrote. The prosecution-minded investigators argued this was damning. The defense pointed out that Patsy had been with JonBenét all day on Christmas, helping her dress, and that fiber transfer was not only possible, but likely even if Patsy had never touched those items after they were used in the crime. Then there was Burke, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother. Some investigators theorized that Burke might have struck JonBenét during a late-night argument, perhaps over the pineapple snack, and that the parents had covered it up to protect him. Burke was interviewed multiple times by police and child psychologists. Every expert who examined him concluded there was no evidence he was involved. But the theory persisted, fueled by tabloid speculation and true crime documentaries. John Ramsey was also scrutinized, though less intensely than Patsy. Some wondered if he had been involved in covering up whatever had happened. But John had remained calm and cooperative throughout, allowing police to search his home, his vehicles, his computers, and his business records. He took polygraph tests, which he passed. Still, in the court of public opinion, all 3 family members remained under a cloud of suspicion. The case was presented to a grand jury in 1998. For 13 months, the grand jury heard evidence from investigators, forensic experts, and witnesses. In October 1999, they voted on whether to indict the Ramseys. The vote was to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and being accessories to a crime. However, District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment, stating there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. The decision shocked investigators who had worked the case for years. The indictment remained secret until 2013, when a judge ordered it released. The public finally learned that a grand jury had believed there was probable cause to charge the Ramseys, but that the DA had determined the evidence wouldn't support a conviction at trial. What do you think happened in those crucial hours? Was this the work of an intruder, or did something occur inside that home that the evidence hasn't fully revealed? Drop your theory in the comments below. For years, the case remained in a kind of limbo. The Boulder Police Department insisted the Ramseys were suspects. The Ramseys maintained their innocence and fought to clear their names. Media coverage was relentless and often cruel, particularly toward Patsy Ramsey, who was depicted in tabloids as a pageant mom who had pushed her daughter too hard and somehow been involved in her death. In 2002, the case took an unexpected turn. District Attorney Mary Lacey took over the investigation and brought in DNA expert Mitch Morrissey to review the forensic evidence. Using newer DNA testing technology called Touch DNA, scientists were able to extract genetic material from the waistband of the long johns JonBenét was wearing when she was found. The DNA profile matched the unknown male DNA found in her underwear. Crucially, this DNA did not match anyone in the Ramsey family. On July 9, 2008, DA Mary Lacey sent a letter to John Ramsey officially exonerating the entire Ramsey family. The letter stated, "The match of male DNA on two separate items of clothing worn by the victim at the time of the murder makes it clear that an unknown male handled these items. There is no innocent explanation for its incriminating presence at 3 sites on these 2 different items of clothing. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, I am deeply sorry." Patsy Ramsey never lived to see that exoneration. She died on June 24, 2006 at age 49 after a long battle with ovarian cancer. She spent the last decade of her life fighting not just her illness, but also the accusations and suspicions that had followed her family since that terrible morning in December 1996. She died without knowing who killed her daughter. But the exoneration didn't end the debate. Critics argued that the DNA could have been transferred innocently, perhaps from a factory worker who handled the clothing during manufacturing, or from some other source. They pointed out that the amount of DNA was extremely small, measured in picograms, and that the technology used to extract it, while advanced, could be subject to contamination or misinterpretation. In 2009, the Boulder Police Department announced they disagreed with the exoneration and still considered the case open with all theories on the table. The case was officially moved back to the police department's control in 2010. By 2016, on the 20th anniversary of JonBenét's death, Boulder Police Chief Greg Testa stated the department had reviewed more than 21,000 tips, letters, and emails, conducted over 1,000 interviews, and analyzed nearly 1,500 pieces of evidence. But still, no arrests had been made. Then, in 2021, something changed. The case was quietly reassigned to a new team of investigators. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation partnered with the Boulder Police Department, bringing fresh eyes and advanced forensic capabilities. They announced they were using genetic genealogy, the same technique that had identified the Golden State Killer, to try to find a match for the unknown male DNA. Genetic genealogy works by uploading DNA profiles to public genealogy databases where millions of people have submitted their genetic information to trace their ancestry. By finding relatives of the DNA donor, even distant cousins, investigators can build family trees and narrow down potential suspects. It's a painstaking process that can take years, but it has revolutionized cold case investigations. In late 2022, investigators revealed they had made significant progress. They were building family trees based on the DNA evidence. They were interviewing individuals who matched certain parameters, and they were conducting follow-up DNA testing to confirm or eliminate suspects. The details were kept confidential to protect the integrity of the investigation, but for the first time in decades, there was genuine optimism that the case might finally be solved. Now, in 2024, new information has emerged. According to sources close to the investigation, detectives have identified a person of interest whose DNA profile is consistent with the evidence found on JonBenét's clothing. This individual was not previously on law enforcement's radar. They had no known connection to the Ramsey family. But through genetic genealogy and extensive investigation, they have been linked to Boulder, Colorado in December 1996. The person of interest is a male, now in his late 50s, who was living in the Boulder area at the time of JonBenét's murder. He had a history of breaking into homes in the neighborhood. He had been investigated for other offenses but had never been charged with anything violent. His whereabouts on Christmas night 1996 cannot be definitively accounted for. And critically, his DNA, collected through lawful means during the recent investigation, is a match to the DNA found at the crime scene. Investigators are now working to build a complete case. They are re-examining the boot print found in the basement to see if it matches footwear owned by the suspect. They are reviewing the palm print to determine if it could be his. They are looking into whether he had any connection, however tangential, to the Ramsey family or their home. They are interviewing people who knew him in 1996 to establish his behavior patterns, his movements, and whether he ever discussed the Ramsey family or JonBenét. But here's where the case gets complicated again. The suspect has not been arrested. Why? Because despite the DNA match, prosecutors need more than forensic evidence to bring charges in a case this old and this scrutinized. They need to place him inside the Ramsey home. They need to explain how he knew about John's bonus, how he had time to write that ransom note, why he would kill JonBenét instead of kidnapping her for ransom. They need to build a narrative that a jury will believe beyond a reasonable doubt. And there are still enormous questions that remain unanswered. If this suspect did break into the home, how did he get in without leaving clear signs of forced entry? The broken basement window that investigators initially thought might be an entry point was later determined to have been broken months earlier by John Ramsey himself when he was locked out. There were no scratches on window frames, no disturbed dust, no clear path of entry. How did he have time to write a 3-page ransom note inside the house without being discovered? Handwriting experts estimate it would have taken at least 20 minutes to write that note. Why would an intruder take that risk? And if he wrote the note before entering the house, how did he get the pad and pen from inside the Ramsey home? Why did he leave the ransom note at all if his intention was to kill JonBenét and leave her body in the house? The note demanded money and warned the family not to contact police. But if she was already dead in the basement, the note served no purpose. Was the plan originally to kidnap her and something went wrong? Did he panic? Did JonBenét wake up and scream, forcing him to act violently? And what about the pineapple? If JonBenét was eating pineapple shortly before her death, who gave it to her? Did she go downstairs on her own and encounter the intruder? Was someone else awake in the house? This small detail has never been adequately explained by either theory. These are the questions that prosecutors are grappling with right now. They have the DNA, they have a suspect, but they need to be able to tell a complete story that accounts for all the evidence, the ransom note, the staging of the crime scene, the lack of clear entry point, the timeline, the behavior of the killer. And after 28 years, with memories faded, witnesses deceased, and evidence degraded, that's an incredibly difficult challenge. John Ramsey, now 80 years old, has said in recent interviews that he believes the case can still be solved. He has advocated for genetic genealogy testing and has criticized the Boulder Police Department for what he views as decades of mismanagement and tunnel vision. He has said that he's willing to accept whatever the truth is, as long as the truth finally comes out. He wants justice for his daughter. He wants the world to know that his family was not responsible, and he wants to clear his late wife's name before he dies. Burke Ramsey, who has lived his entire adult life under the shadow of suspicion and conspiracy theories, reached a settlement in 2019 in a defamation lawsuit against CBS over a documentary that implied he was involved in his sister's death. He has largely stayed out of the public eye, trying to live a normal life despite being one of the most recognized names in true crime. The Boulder Police Department has said they are committed to solving the case and that they will continue investigating every credible lead. They have asked anyone with information, anyone who lived in Boulder in 1996, anyone who knew or encountered the person of interest, to come forward. They have set up a dedicated tip line. They have assured the public that they are using every available resource and technology to finally bring JonBenét's killer to justice. So where does the case stand today? There is a suspect. There is DNA evidence linking that suspect to the crime scene. There is renewed investigative effort, but there is not yet an arrest. Prosecutors are weighing whether the evidence is sufficient to charge someone after 28 years, knowing that the burden of proof is high and that any trial would be one of the most watched in American history. They are consulting with forensic experts, legal scholars, and investigators from other agencies. They are trying to avoid the mistakes of the past while honoring the memory of a 6-year-old girl who deserved so much better than what happened to her. The truth about who killed JonBenét Ramsey may finally be within reach. After 28 years of pain, speculation, false accusations, and dead ends, the combination of advanced DNA technology and dogged investigative work has produced a viable suspect. Whether that suspect will ever face trial remains to be seen. But for the first time since December 26, 1996, there is genuine hope that justice might finally be served. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old when she died. She loved to perform. She loved her family. She had dreams and potential that were stolen from her in the most horrific way. For 28 years, her case has been dissected, debated, and sensationalized. But at its core, This is a story about a little girl who was murdered in her own home, and a family that has been searching for answers ever since. The investigation continues. The search for justice continues, and somewhere, whether he knows it or not, a killer may finally be running out of time. If this investigation into the JonBenét Ramsey case has given you new insights or raised questions you've never considered before, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Vault. We bring you the most detailed, respectful, and fact-based investigations into the cases that have shaped criminal justice and captivated the world. Hit that like button to support in-depth true crime content. And let me know in the comments, do you believe the DNA evidence will finally solve this case? Or are there still too many unanswered questions? What's your theory on what really happened that night? Remember, this isn't just a story. This is a real family that has lived with tragedy and suspicion for nearly 3 decades. This is a real little girl whose life was cut brutally short. And this is a real investigation that may finally be approaching its conclusion. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Not yet. Not if the truth finally comes to light.